I just thank you all again for joining us. We're going through the book of Judges. We got done with Tola, and we're moving on to a gentleman by the name of Jair. Okay, and someone had asked when we're going to get to Jephthah. Said I'd really love to hear about him, and he's going to be next. He's going to be the next judge that we come to. We'll have 45 years of peace and beauty, and then Jephthah comes along and things start to struggle again, so they have to call on him. Right now we're in the book of Judges, chapter 10. Chapter 10 is where we're at the very beginning. If you want to look, it says, after him, that's Tola, after him, Jair the Gileadite arose and judged Israel 22 years. He had 30 sons who rode on 30 donkeys, and they had 30 cities in the land of Gilead that are called Havoth Jair to this day. And Jair died and was buried in Kamon. So, what we do is we take 2-3 verses. Most of the judges are given a lot more than that, but Tola, Jair are given 2 to 3 verses apiece. And you think, what in the world can you possibly get out of just a couple of verses? But the Lord speaks to us in incredible ways. And so that's what I did with these papers that I've written that you can find on our church website, fccop.info. Tons of resources, and we'd love for you to check that out. But in this paper, we have 22 years of harmony from Judge Jair. And what I wrote is that down around Bethlehem, there was a beautiful love story taking place between ancestors of Jesus. Somewhere between 1200 and 1300 BC, give or take, Ruth, the widowed daughter-in-law of Naomi, is wooing a suitor by the name of Boaz. And they will be parents of Obed, who will be the father of Jesse, who will be the father of King David, who will be the great relative of Jesus, the Son of Man. However, this is not what we're actually going to talk about today. This just happens to be taking place the exact same time as Jair, so that's why that's relevant. So roughly 120 miles to the northeast of Bethlehem, in the land of Gilead, West Manasseh, a gentleman by the name of Jair has been given the task of judging Israel. I've said this before, that judges were called upon by God. This was long before there were legislators or kings. God wanted us to look towards like-minded individuals for counsel. Right? He did not want us looking for kings or presidents or prime ministers or pharaohs or anything else. We were supposed to be looking towards like-minded individuals. And once you get to the book of Samuel and the first king, Saul, comes along, God tries desperately to warn the people that they do not want a king because this, and this is going to happen, and none of those things are going to be good. So before any of that happened, we had these judges. And up to this point, Israel had a revolving door of struggle and redemption, but has seemingly found peace at last after 23 years with Tola. Now, a God-fearing individual from an outward tribe has been called to continue that peace. So we had 23 years of peace, and now we're going to have 22 years of peace with Jair. And there's beauty in the inclusivity of the Lord when it comes to the judges. What I mean by that is he has a way of making sure that everyone is included, all right, as far as his followers go. And while he could stick to the primary tribes of Judah, the bottom half, the ones that are better represented, he doesn't do that. He found a way to bring in one of the forgotten wandering tribes from the other side of the Jordan. And this likely built up the people of Manasseh, helped build their self-esteem, their courage, and it made them feel as important as the rest of Israel. Now, over the years of wandering and captivity, the people of Manasseh had become one of the lost tribes that had been buried with the blood of foreign land. And so they had relations with Assyrians, with Philistines, with different regions, different lands. They'd had relations. So it's safe to say that they were not pure blood, all right, which likely led them to be a little bit of an outcast, all right, kind of outsiders, which didn't help that they were actually on the other side of the Jordan. And so They were not pure Hebrew blood, but that did not stop God from using their land and their citizens as a blessing for the rest of Israel. We see time and time again that God can use whomever He wants. He can use people who fear Him, and He can use people who don't fear Him. Because God's God and He can do what He wants. He just has that way about Him. All right, he used the Pharaoh in Egypt, believe it or not. He was able to use him. All right, he was able to use Moses. He was able to use 12 unassuming individuals to follow Jesus and take the word to the rest of the world. So he can use you. He can use me. He can use someone that you would least suspect. There may have been outcasts not only because of the impurity, but their geographical separation from the other tribes. They may have been happy to be set apart from the others, or they may have felt unincluded. All right, each way would be pure speculation. But they lived in a land that was wonderful for fruitful crops, and it was as well as the sheep that they tended to. It was a fruitful land that they got a lot out of. God blessed that land for them. What about the judge himself, Jair? Well, we don't really know a lot about him. We know his name's Jair. In Hebrew, it means he shines, or he is enlightened. And we are told little more than he had 30 sons, who had 30 donkeys in 30 cities. What can we grasp from that? We have a man that's acquired a large chunk of land, and he's made it fruitful. All right, he is a prosperous man that is responsible for much, and God will make him responsible for much more. If he had 30 sons, I would venture to say that he had more than one wife, likely some concubines. All right, that was not uncommon. We'll see later on. We'll see David even had 10 concubines in 2 Samuel when he had to flee from his son Absalom. He left 10 concubines back in the kingdom. But while that is something that God did not condone, again, it was not uncommon. And after Lamech, who was the first person that we'll read about in the Old Testament that had more than one wife, after Lamech, we see it happen again with the likes of Abraham, Moses, David, Solomon, as well as the judge Gideon. All right, and that's just to name a few. So those 30 rode 30 donkeys, which would be similar to someone having 30 Mercedes, because not everyone had a donkey. That was not common. Donkeys were not common in that area, and not everyone had the luxury of having one. But we can stop here and we can examine this text for just a moment. We have a wealthy individual who has a lot. And it can be easy for us to look at people who have nice things and are doing good for themselves and think, you know, couldn't you have spent that money on something else? Couldn't you have donated that money to the church? Couldn't you tithe more? Couldn't you have taken the money that you spent on that car and put it towards a tithe or whatever? Well, here's the thing. The money that those people are spending on those items, on that stuff, is paying salaries. That's helping people live. And so there is goodness from the giving that they're giving in the form of capitalism. It's a beautiful thing. And so we see that God does not look down upon the wealthy, as he's using Jair. And we see that it's quite possible for a man of wealth to be a godly man. We see that neither God nor the people condemned him because he had acquired much. And we also see that God did not require him to give away his possessions in order to lead the people. So I say this because we live in a time where people are being condemned, not because they aren't wearing Armani, but because they are. And this can be increasingly large group of people, evangelical and others, that are anything but. All right, they're condemning those who have been blessed with good things. So frowning upon someone because they have a new furniture or a new car is certainly not godly, and there's no love in that. If this were the measurement of judgment, then we would see the likes of Moses, Job, David, Solomon in hot water. Instead, they were blessed just as much as everyone else. So here Jair is using his wealth as an advantage to the Lord. They can use those donkeys to take the word out to all those people in the surrounding areas. And so taking advantage of the land that he possessed, the citizens who live on that land had a large number of sons. They had the resources in which to travel as a means to carry out God's word. And all of this from a man from the other side of the river, or the other side of the tracks, as we may say today. this is going on for 45 years total. Like I said, 23 years with Tola, another 22 here with Jair. And we include the previous Tola, and this is not to imply that every citizen of Israel was compliant with the will of God, just as we know that it's not possible. But what we do know is that Israel, as a collective unit, had found peace and harmony, and they had found the will of God in their hearts. So the thought of that, the idea that they were all compliant, would simply be naive. But what it does mean is that the naysayers and those who idolized false gods were kept at bay. All right, they were the silent minority. And they would have likely felt out of place trying to be open about their idolization or their transgressions. It would have been taboo for handmade images of false gods to be sold at the marketplace. And under a watchful eye of Jair and his 30 sons, whom he utilized to the fullest extent, God's influence was proclaimed throughout the land. So peace and a simple way of life had become the norm. And we can use that as an example for today. As I had mentioned previously with Tola, just how much you can get out of 2 small verses of this man. What I got out of that was we had a quiet, peaceful man who didn't stir up trouble, who didn't have any chaos, who didn't have any drama, and there was peace amongst that. Those who follow the Lord have this tendency to be seen as dull and out of place because we don't partake of illicit substances or spend our time in liquor establishments or do things that other people do. But that's not to say that Christians don't enjoy life. It's to say that we have established priorities, and God is at the top of that list of priorities. Partaking of a baseball game or a trip to the zoo, the aquarium, it's fulfilling because it's a time that we get to consider just how God has blessed us with what we have around us. And so partaking of rated R movies or 90 proof are now activities that convict our soul and lead us away from God. They're not things that we look forward to. They're things that we shy away from. So faithful and joyful is something that Jair had helped establish in Israel. And it's something that we are to establish in our lives. Faithful and serving. See, not excitement for smoke and wine, but excited for the blessings of salvation for the Lord. You see, let us now grow weary. Let us not grow weary, should I say, or discontent with what He has given us, and let us rejoice in His faithfulness. And that is what Jair and the people of Israel did. They didn't grow weary. They didn't grow bored. You know, they simply enjoyed the blessings and the fruitfulness that God had given them. And I pray that that's something that we can glean from this text. God only gave us 2-3 verses, but He's in there for a reason. And so I feel like we can all glean something from the least of the texts. Until next time, I want to thank you all so much for joining us. I appreciate it, and I pray that you leave a like, a comment, hit the subscribe button. You'll hear the bell icon come on every time that we start a new video. And in the meantime, I pray that you have a wonderful day and that you not grow weary.